Hello and welcome to the Breaking Heads podcast number 88. My name is Fred. We usually do German-speaking content here exclusively, but we wanted to take the opportunity, me and Arne, who is with me, to do an English episode, especially about Thousand Suns. We just recorded a Thousand Suns podcast in German, which basically explains the basics. Is in our current usual introductory format, and in this part 2, I'm gonna set Arne loose a bit. And we're gonna talk about his list, about the different other Thousand Suns lists that were at the WTC, the World Championship in Belgium just last week. And I want to find out how Arne plays Thousand Suns, what is his view, and hopefully give you lots of insights into the faction, into also maybe his and also our way of seeing 40k. And we're doing this today in English. We will probably reach a completely different audience too, and I'm really happy, and I'm very looking forward to your feedback. Arne, thank you for being with me here.
Thank you for having me.
Let's just get into it. My impression. We start like this. So, guys, I will be not sorry for using lots of English words because we now have an English podcast. Finally, we can use all the English phrases we are getting punished for using in our German content. But we will probably assume most of the times that you are vaguely familiar with the army rules from Thousand Suns. So we're not going to explain cabal points. We're not going to explain like the basic that Magnus can choose between -1 damage and +2 to move. But it's probably going to come up, and I will try to basically remind us and you as a listener that this exists and this is a basic rule when we just quickly go over it, and then maybe it gets forgotten over that. So I will try that, but you should probably don't expect us to give you like a zero start introduction into Thousand Suns here. If you haven't had that and you speak German, please listen to the German podcast, and maybe, I don't know, there's lots of English speaking introductory content to Thousand Suns, I'm sure, out there on the internet. That said, let's now get into it. And I will start with my impression from Thousand Suns. And my impression from Thousand Suns from the very time we played against each other, Arne, was Thousand Suns gives you lots of agency. You can do a lot of things that usually other armies cannot do, or like a unit with 6-inch or 5-inch move shouldn't be able to do. And so there's just so many tools in that index. And here I want to find out like how you use these tools and what tools you are using and why.
All right.
I think we should start with the list. Then we have this off, and then we can start with why this stuff is in there. And there's like a couple of questions I also picked up from other players that will get us talking. So in your Thousand Suns list, you have Ahriman. You have 3 Exalted Sorcerers, all on Discs of Change. One of them has the Umbellific Crystal, which is the enhancement, which gives you the teleport ability. You have 3 Infernal Masters. One of them has the Arcane Vortex, which gives him more damage. You have, of course, Magnus the Red. You have a normal Thousand Sun Sorcerer, which has the enhancement Lord of Forbidden Lore. This was the one that gives
Double
you
spell?
extra double ritual. Yeah. Whenever Arne says spell, he means Cabalic Ritual, by the way.
True.
But we will keep saying spell because basically you're playing wizards. Then you have 6 units of Rubrics. They're all 5-man Rubric units. They all have a Reaper Cannon, and 4 of them have Bolters, and only 2 of them have Flamers. And then you have no Terminators, 1 Vortex Beast, and 1 Rhino. Nothing else. That's it. That's how many characters was that? 8?
9 characters, I believe.
Counting Magnus. Yeah.
Yes.
Counting Magnus, 9 characters, 6 Rubric Marines, squads of 5, 1 Vortex Beast, and 1 Thousand Sun Rhino. So the best first question for this is, Arne, why are there so many characters? And there are even characters walking around by themselves. They're all vulnerable, sitting there, being shot at. What are you doing?
All right. So, well, first of all, The way I got to this list was initially I was playing like a more termy based regular Thousand Suns list,
Hmm?
and kept trying to like buff the Terminators with characters, buff the rubrics with characters, and then Hasho from Germany here gave me basically the idea that the Infernal Master with a squad of rubrics, it changes the interaction. It's instead of the Infernal Master buffing the rubrics, you end up with the rubrics buffing the Infernal Master. Basically, the
Hmm.
rubric marines give the character they're attached to wound rerolls, and the Infernal Master does enough damage that you're willing to pay 95 points for the wound rerolls and the ablative wounds. And that kind of made me think again, and I kind of just sat down and opened up my Thousand Suns index again and went through every single character and just went, all right, last time I read this, I read all the abilities and went like, this isn't really worth putting on rubrics. Yeah, this is maybe worth putting on rubrics. And reading it like this, Ahriman seems awesome because he gives rubrics +1 to wound, and the Exalted Sorcerer seems all right because he gives a 4 invul. Exalted on disc, of course. And then reading it again, I went, all right, I'm just going to ignore the ability section here for a moment, and I'm just going to read their guns. I'm just going to go and pretend I'm reading pretend this is a Predator on disc or a Predator Infernal Master or whatever, right? Read it as if it was just a Rhino chassis that has a gun on it. What is the gun? And basically, the Exalted Sorcerer on disc has a gun that I'd be happy to mount on a Predator because it's an 18-inch flamer, 6 -2 D3 ignores cover, and obviously gets dev wounds and +1 to wound. And then the Infernal Master obviously has a flamer that I'd be well, you can find that flamer on a Hellhound. And then, you know,
Maybe he took
um,
it from there.
yeah, he probably stole a Hellhound's Inferno cannon and just pretended it's a spell. Um,
Mhm.
so yeah, those I feel like I kind of like read through it again like
Mhm.
that, and then obviously didn't quite stick with that. Like the Exalted Sorcerer on disc also has good abilities, and the Infernal Master kind of does, kind of doesn't have good abilities. It's like in this weird space in between, but it's cheap and gives a lot of Cabal points. And that was the other thing. I kept wanting to add more Cabal points into the list, and
Oh wait.
the
Let's
yeah,
before we go there. So buffing the characters instead of buffing with units, because the rubric has this amazing special rule, and
hmm
it says the unit gets reroll, which always includes the attached character. Changing it around, focusing on the characters. And you said there just like briefly, I just want to repeat that for the viewers. Of course, because all these weapons are psychic weapons, you benefit from your army rule, which gives you death wounds or sustained hits.
hmm
Or what's the third one you can have?
lethal hits. I've never
Ah,
picked it.
okay. How I don't even okay, I don't even know how to comment on that. Probably not necessary. You just have rerolls. Okay, and you get +1 because the
Yes,
+1 to wound you get from being just at 6 inches to Magnus, and
yeah,
that's like because like all the data sheets that you were looking at in the codex, you were looking through the lens of already knowing the buffs that you bring, like
yeah,
Magnus and the
exactly.
Terminators and Magnus, the rubrics, and your general army rule.
Yeah, exactly. And the Infernal Master has that little ability where you can every turn flip a dice you rolled to a 6. And just like the combination of the Infernal Master with the devastating wounds from Kindred Sorcery, with the full wound rerolls from being in a squad of rubrics,
Hmm.
with +1 damage from Arcane Vortex, with +1 to wound from Magnus, like it goes crazy. I have had opportunities where that guy just wipes a squad on his own, just like, oh, 2d6, you're dead.
Oops.
Um, and it's yeah. Um, he's 90 points, but he shoots better than like he shoots better than many 200-point vehicles. I feel
I
like
mean, don't they the ones on this they have like 5 or 6 wounds
6 wounds, the ones on disc.
and toughness.
4.
Okay, other than the toughness, it's basically a void weaver.
Yeah, that's true. So 12-inch move, infantry, fly, six wound, 4-up, invuln. It's kind of. I do sometimes play these guys like they're Void Weavers. They just
Nice.
kind of fly around and do their thing. And, you get to like reroll saves and blank saves on them as well because they're psycho models.
Hmm.
Um, so it's surprisingly difficult to actually wipe the Exalted on disc sometimes.
Yeah, I see that. You were just okay, perfect. You were just getting to the point with the Cabal points because obviously they don't only bring a good gun and have just good stats by themselves, being buffed for all the stuff, being even better than,
Hmm.
and they also bring you the Cabal points.
Yes. So the Cabal points. So when I was starting out playing Thousand Suns, I was playing regular lists, and it was like I was, having those regular 16 to 18 Cabal point, whatever, and the mechanic felt really strong, but it always felt like I was so limited. And then once I realized that I wanted to play more characters just for the sake of having more characters with good guns, the list ended up with, in this iteration, 26 Cabal points. Um,
There's like 10 more than you started with.
yeah, that's 10 more than I started playing with, and it was just I get to do a lot of very silly things. Um, like you are suddenly at the point where stepping out of cover, double doom bolting someone, and stepping back, which is like 19 Cabal points, is like kind of
Stepping
an.
back, so moving. You can do this with the one on disc that is like running around and being all vulnerable.
Well, the one on disc can only doom bolt once,
Okay.
but yes. Like stepping out 12 inches with a disc, doom bolting someone, and stepping back with the disc. That runs you 12 Cabal points, right? Um,
And that just kills my lone operative on the marker.
sure, yeah.
Mm.
Um, but that's like that's nowhere near the limit, of course, right? But stepping out with the lone operative sorcerer, um, using a
That's
double move to like position him so you can
hmm
move his, like, let's say Magnus on +2 move, so he moves 8 and then another 6, so he moves 14. Assuming he gets out of the aura on the first move. If you can string back in the aura, he can move 16.
hmm
Um, assuming coherency allows. Um, so move 16, double doombolt someone, move backwards again. Is like 24 Cabal points, which is like
you can do that.
it's all right. You can just kind of do that, and it's one of those things that you can just, like, when you're standing there in the neutral and your opponent's like on a marker and you're on a marker and you're doing things with lone ops and whatever, and you just get to go step up, double doombolt someone, step back. You're like, all right, that's pretty nice. But you can also go, like one of my games, I've teleported forward my crystal, and I had a guy in a rhino. Two of my guys in rhinos, I think. Yeah. So basically, was at night, was with my crystal up in the sky and 2 exalted on disc in my rhino, where they started the game because my opponent had desolators. Um, I was at 19 Cabal points, I want to say. 26 minus 3 minus 4. Yeah.
hmm
Um, and then from 19 Cabal points, I was able to uh, drop in an outsider 12 of infiltrators, then walk into the bubble with the double move, see a squad of Deathwatch veterans and a squad of desolators, turn off the armor on the desolators for 9, um, warp sight the warp sight the
The
what are these
desolation
guys
rules.
called? The desolation? No, the Deathwatch veterans.
Yeah.
Um, and I think that does that add up? 15 plus the double move for 5, right? It didn't quite add up. I needed to use Ahriman to order the double move on
Yeah.
that turn.
hmm
So it was one of those, like, good thing I have a Muta Beast because Ahriman in my backfield got to within 36 of where I dropped in the crystal situations. But like that then allows you to That left me with 4 Cabal points left at the end of the turn for 2 rerolls on my opponent's turn, and it let me kill the Desolators and the Deathwatch veteran team on the teleport in with my crystal.
Nice.
Which, and that's kind of like, yeah.
I mean, we joke about how broken Elder is with double moving, and they just use their 3 CP for that every turn, and then you have 2 extra moves. But you also kind of like with the list that if you have enough Cabal points, you can also always do 2 extra moves with your army.
Yes.
After the opponent has moved, even after the opponent has phantasmed. And
yeah, it's after Phantasm, but so obviously it's not after the opponent's movement phase. The timing is not as good as Phantasm, sadly.
yeah. It's actually more aggressive than more defensive, right?
Exactly. It is a much more aggressive ability than Phantasm because when I go first, I just get to move 3 times before my opponent gets the opportunity to do anything.
Yeah.
But it's I don't get to unless I'm doing the walk out, Doombolt, walk back in things, I don't get to Fire and Fade on my opponents.
Also, we need to talk about this later a bit more, but I want to give some keyword here already that this is quite an aggressive play, or there are lots of opportunity for aggressive plays. As we just said, this is you can react to your opponent's defensive movement or to their position, and you get extra movement, but you cannot react defensively after your opponent has moved and then get out of harm's way. You're basically using and losing your units. But I think this fits very well in your playstyle. Other people maybe have heard you in English-speaking content talk about that. We will get to this in a minute. Let's stay with the Cabal points for now. So this you came to the critical amount of Cabal points that you could do these extra moves you wouldn't be able to do. By the way, I just want to throw this in. This really reminds me also some of my thought process I had with Elder, just like in the last week of writing the list for the War Masters, where I thought, oh, I could just change one model here, one unit here, then it would stop my opponent from not being interacted with. And basically made a list oh, I wasn't fan of the Wave Knight one, but if I have a Wave Knight, the opponent can't hide. Something like this. Oh, it's actually you maybe you don't want to take it all the time, but it would give you the opportunity that the opponent cannot hide. And it's basically the same here, right? If you have this amount of Cabal points, you can create prepare a game state where the opponent cannot do anything to stop your damage. Maybe he's not going to get all the damage, but you're going to do a lot of damage because one very important thing that probably you already know if you played against Thousand Suns before and you read the rules is that there's a stratagem which says all your psychic weapons get indirect. Magnus has a psychic weapon. We just also established that all the good weapons are actually the psychic weapons on the sorcerers or on all the psychers.
Mm-hmm.
So if you bring a unit in aggressive, it also means you get to use your stratagem because the stratagem for indirect fire needs one of your psychers to see.
Yeah.
Means suddenly your whole army is indirect. With limited range and so on, but it is still.
Yeah. And I have I've been able to sometimes, not always, but once if the game if you get to spend a few turns building up command points as well, you get to these situations where you can even do a warp site for 2 command points and then another warp site for 6 Cabal points.
Oh no.
And you just target 2 of your opponent's units and your entire army gets indirect ignores cover against those 2 units.
Can you do that on one unit? From one unit at 2
you
units?
can do that from one psyker at 2 opposing units.
So I was hiding. Oh, he could use his crystal, but then the crystal is gone. Okay, I'm going to only trade the crystal against one of my units. No, actually, I'm going to trading at least 2 units against the crystal.
Yeah, and the crystal, the unit that crystals in is still a unit of rubrics with flamers, soul reapers, and a guy with a big flamer that has full wound rerolls against targets on markers, and that can shut off your armor after it teleports in. So, that unit still kills a unit when it teleports in, plus whatever it marks for indirect. And it's very fun.
The crystal, just also to refresh for myself, it is in your command phase, you take the unit away.
Mm-hmm.
that means you don't get. Actually, you don't score, right? You wouldn't score, but you also don't get cabal points for that
Correct.
unit.
Correct.
But it will come down just in your reinforcement step after,
Yes.
and it has no limitation for first turn. So
Correct.
it's like an almost instant redeploy, but it jumps over the get cabal points and get mission
And
points
score.
step.
Yeah. It's of all the teleports that currently exist in the game, it's the only one that works while you are engaged in melee. And it's also I think one of the only ones, or maybe the only one, that works on your first turn going first, rather than having to pick up the end of your
Yeah.
opponent's turn, so it only works going second. So it's basically like Veil without the limitations of having to do it at the end of your opponent's turn and not working in melee.
Does
It's
the
yeah.
Necron Veil has the limitation?
Yes, Necron Veil doesn't work while engaged in combat, and Necron Veil doesn't work uh, on their first turn going first.
It's also
Um,
much less. It's like a lot less scary than being shot by Necron warriors than being shot by the whole Thousand Sun army because indirect.
sure. And then uh, on that note of like the
Yeah.
triggering indirect shooting, that's also where like the 2 solo exalted sorcerers on disc come in huge, because they are usually the ones like, if my opponent has basically every game that my opponent has like desolators on the field, I've been able to disembark one of those guys turn 1, fly him forward 12, double move him another 12, so now he's moved 27 inches. Now he's
Yeah.
like in my opponent's DZ. He can probably see desolators now. If he still can't, I can just double move him again. And then by that time, he'll have moved 39 inches. I am positively confident that the flying infantry 40 mil base, after a 39-inch move, will see desolators. Um,
Sounds reasonable.
at
Yeah.
which point, I still have enough points left to shut off armor and warp sight. So, yeah. I basically get to send one of these guys in and just mark a unit for death. Which is yeah, it's fun.
And he also shot,
Hmm? Oh yeah,
and
he still gets to shoot. Yes.
he still gets to slow someone,
Yeah, and he still gets to slow someone.
and he can slow someone else than the target he's shooting or he's warp sighting.
Yes.
Yeah, that's a good sacrifice.
He generally, it's generally worth it when I send one of those guys in.
You can take the 95 points. Oh, I like this so
He's
much. And
105.
this is like the most technical Rhino then. So it's like you save them, you make them safe in the squad from indirect, and also you make sure they also get like 3-inch extra move because of disembarkment. And it's,
Yes.
guys, by the way, it's weird because it doesn't have the mounted keyword. It has the infantry keyword. That means it can go into the rhinos, even though
Yeah.
it has a huge base. And I don't know how they get this thing in there.
No, so basically the only ones that are mounted are the Zangor on discs. I don't know why the Zangors on discs are mounted, but also Arimon on disc, and like these guys, they're infantry and they go in infantry squads. So it's all,
I think it's so that you can put them in rhinos if they're attached to units, because
yeah,
reasonably
of
people
course.
attach all their characters to units.
No, I refuse. I have been considering taking a solo Terminator sorcerer
For what reason?
because he has a good gun, of course, and he marks someone for rerolling ones to hit against them for the rest of the turn.
Oh, that's nice. Yeah,
Yeah, it's
because you
nice.
only have wound rerolls at the moment.
Yes, but it's okay. All my weapons are flamers.
Yeah, I got the feeling a little bit when putting together the buffs you get for your character. Actually, we shouldn't call it guns, because basically it's like the new equivalent of all the different smites and Duboid and Gaze of Hate or whatever
Fair.
it was before. But it's now just a normal weapon profile and has the psychic keyword, which sometimes gives you a defensive buff against them, but in your army it just gives you lots of offensive buffs that's very hard to topple with any defensive buff. And when you count together these buffs and bonuses you can get, um, it feels like you have O's on every target you shoot, right? Because
That's actually somewhat, yeah,
I mean,
that's
it's
somewhat
not
true.
as insane as it is with the O's plus sustained or lethal hits combination we see, like really um, keeping the Space Marines in the game against the top
Mm.
armies. But it's still like I don't know. You have wound rerolls, you have +1 to wound, you have +1 to hit, you have dev wounds, you have sustained hits. Like this all gets up that like adds up so much that you can never take any of these offensive profiles as face value, just as you can never do this with O's. And like basically, I mean, are you doing double the amount of damage you should be doing? Probably.
Probably more. Probably more. I'm pretty sure, like, if you go from like an Infernal Master and you read their stats, and it's like, all right, this is 2d6 shots of 722. That is the upgraded Infernal Master. You're like,
Yeah.
all right, 2d6 shots of 722 auto hitting. That's not bad. And
Mm.
then you go add dev wounds, add +1 to wound, add reroll wounds. And at this point, you get to, it's really fun because when you wound someone on 2s with your Infernal Master, you get to the point where it's unlikely that on your wound reroll you will roll more than 1-1. So you just reroll everything except 6s because you'll just flip a 1 into a 6 at the end anyways.
Oh no.
So you basically get fishing without the downside of rolling the additional 1 because you'll just flip that one into a 6. And that's how the guy just goes and kills someone for 10 mortal wounds plus an additional 5 saves at neg 2 for 2.
Long story short, guys, why are you not running 3 Infernal Masters?
Yes. Yeah, that is the long story short. Like the upgraded one is obviously insane, but like half the damage of the upgraded one is still a squad of Space Marines most of the time.
Yeah, and sometimes you're
Slight
shooting
exaggeration there, I think.
one wound
But
models, then also the other ones are pretty much almost the same except for the death wounds.
well, the dev wounds are a significant, like, they do like 50% dev wounds of their attacks.
Okay.
Because of the re-rolling and the flipping one dice into a 6. But yeah. Yes.
I would talk about the rhinos next. I think it's a good.
All right.
I mean, if you have more, I'm sure there's plenty of interesting combinations with the other characters, but maybe we get to that later in matchups. I think it's probably going to be in matchups more specifically where these different characters and their stats become interesting. But like just a general, like the characters do the damage, and that's why we take them. That's like the general gist. The Cabal points do this. Make you unfair, make you Eld. I feel like, to be honest, I mean, you're gonna look at it with a like raise your eyebrows again and again if I say this, but this makes you look Elder when you use the Cabal points. And you got to a point where you had so many Cabal points where you were doing more random shit than the Elder was doing. But
eyebrows are raised, but fair.
Yeah, this is audio only content. Let's stick to our script here because we have one. So the characters, and you have one rhino. I called it a very tactical rhino. Really like for the Space Marine matchup, indirect shooting and so on, gives you extra movement and also can double move as well. And you can shoot with 2 guys out of it. So actually, you can have 2 Infernal Masters shooting out of the rhino.
I could technically have 2 Infernal Masters shooting out of the rhino.
Okay, but yeah, that sounds very horrible. Why are you not taking more rhinos? Your dudes are 5-inch movement dudes. I would never want to play this army because they're 5-inch movement dudes who cannot teleport. Only one guy can teleport. And why don't you give them nice rhinos? You mean, like this old Harlequin style you were playing last year as well. You can jump out, like get some extra movement.
Yeah.
I destroy your transport. You disembark behind the wall. And all these cool interactions. Why is there only one rhino?
So, well, the fully honest answer is I would love to play 3 rhinos. Please tell me which unit is worth less than a rhino in my army. That's kind of the.
No,
I have
you're not
6
allowed to
squads of
play
Rubric Marines.
2,300. You're not.
Yes, exactly. If I was allowed to play 2,150 points exactly, I would run 2 additional rhinos for my next 150 points.
Mhm.
It is the next best unit to take, but
Mhm.
I am not willing to drop an Infernal Master for a Rhino. They cost the same points. I'm not
Mhm.
willing to drop a Rubric Marine 5-man for a Rhino. They cost the same points. And I have honestly considered dropping the Mutilith Vortex Beast for 2 Rhinos, but then I remember that Eldar exist and that range is a relevant problem that I have to deal with. So I do need the 36-inch range rituals for some matchups, and then
Mhm.
the Vortex Beast stays in. Also, it's like one of my like tanky pieces that likes to frontline in some matchups. It's just like I don't know. I know some people run less Exalted Sorcerers on discs, but I have been talking about how much I like the Exalted Sorcerer on disc for like the past, I don't know, maybe half hour of this podcast. So that isn't happening. The one I have considered dropping Ahriman, but he only pays for 1 Rhino. And
Mhm.
in the end, it's like he lets me cheat on Cabal points once. He lets me do 1 extra ritual that I couldn't actually afford, which is just crucial. Like once per game, when I do all the math and I end up, damn it, I'm short. I can't actually do the double double move and the shut off armor and the warp sight and the other thing I need to do. Well, Ahriman comes in and does one of the rituals for me, and then it actually works out. So that's
One turn
basically
you have
like
30 Cabal points, basically. Right.
1 turn I get to use up to 35 Cabal points, assuming Ahriman turns off someone's armor. And that's like, and also he generates 3 Cabal points for a cost of 115 points, which is like less than 40 points per Cabal point, which is a as good a rate as an Infernal Master. And like as I said, I really value my Cabal points. It's also the thing where like he has a huge like crosshair on him. People like whenever people look at my army, they're like, which squad will I kill first? Obviously, the one with Ahriman, which is honestly somewhat convenient. Um, yeah, I don't mind him being the one to get focused first that much. So yeah, that's like.
Okay, Anna, let's do it like this.
Mhm.
I have a list for you, which is not too different from your list, but has lots of
Okay,
rhinos.
fair.
That list is from our friend Pumba from Poland.
Yeah,
You can give some consideration and arguments here. You don't get to shit talk Puma's list because Poland won and you got only sixth. So his list is Ahriman, 1 Exalted Sorcerer, 1 Infernal Master, Magnus, and 2,000 Sun Sorcerer. So if I count correctly, it's 5 like Psyker models beside Magnus, where you had, was it 8? Okay, 3 short.
mhm.
Then he has rubrics of 10, 2 units of 10, 3 rubric marine units with 5 models, and then 3 rhinos and 3 Zangor Enlightened, like just the small guys with the bow and this for very cheap points, unit of flamers, and the blue scribes. So here we have 3 rhinos.
Yeah.
What do you say?
What do I think? Well, I don't get to shit talk Pumba despite him ending 101 spots behind me in the personal rankings.
Yes,
But
because
no,
it's a team
uh,
tournament.
I know, I know. I'm just kidding.
You can
He
shit talk Liam
deserves it.
later. Don't worry.
He won,
Yeah.
so he deserves it.
No, you can shit talk Liam later. I also have his list
He
up
has
here.
the same list, right? No, it's like one model different.
No, it's different. Liam's
Oh,
list
it's
is different.
different. Okay. Um. So what I can say about this is, like, it's a different approach. It's a more Um, I believe once he loads his 3 rhinos up with rubric marines and a character each, he starts at just what does this count to? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 squads of rubrics. That means 2 squads start on the table with 2,000 sorcerers. So that's 4 Cabal points. 4 from Magnus makes 8 Cabal points on the table. Yeah. So if he has his Ahriman, his Exalted Sorcerer, and his Infernal Master loaded into their 3 Rhinos, he has 8 Cabal points on the table. Am I counting that wrong? That can't be right. 1, 2.
I have
Nope.
no idea because it's not the Cabal points are not listed in the army list anymore, and
No, it's fine. Like, the total works out like that, which is not enough for 2 double moves. So we'd have to use Ahriman's once per game ability to pay for the second double move if he wants to double move, which is just like it's different. He gets to hide in rhinos, which is like relevant. Makes his Astra Militarum matchup a lot better than mine, I will say. We were talking about that after the event. He played 1 round into Astra Militarum, at least, that we chatted after, where he got diced in a just terrible fashion. But yeah, basically, I was saying that my list really doesn't want to play versus the like oops all artillery Astra Militarum, whereas because he's on triple Rhino and he basically presents no targets that can be shot at outside of Rhinos and Magnus. He doesn't present any like infantry profiles to be targeted. He's much better into the artillery. At the same time, I feel like my list kind of takes a completely different approach there, where I just overload the infantry profile to be targeted. So I just go, well, I know you have like some anti-infantry guns, so the moment I decide to step out, I'm just going to step out with 30 rubric marines at once. And then many people can kill 5 rubric marines, but not many people can kill like 3 squads of 5 rubric marines plus a character each. It becomes very awkward to target. And because the only relevant wound, there's basically 2 wounds that are relevant, 3 separate wounds that are relevant in a squad. There's the last wound on my Soul Reaper, because if that guy dies, I have to test for battle shock, which is annoying, but I am testing on a 6-up, so it's okay. Then there's the last wound on my Sergeant. If that one goes down, I lose my wound rerolls. And then there's the last wound on my character himself. If that one goes down, I lose the unit and the damage. But basically, you're killing 3 dudes with bolters first, which are not contributing a lot of damage. You're then killing a guy with a Soul Reaper cannon. And then you get to the Sergeant, and then you get to either a 6 wound or a 4 wound character. And I can use my save rerolls, my turn damage to 0, and each Infernal Master can obviously flip a save dice to a 6 as well. Each one individually.
Can you do it per turn or per battle round?
Per turn, per player turn.
Ooh, that's also really
Yes.
nice defensive mechanism, yeah.
Yeah. So the Infernal Master as a 4 wound character, kind of like, if I blank a save on him, a flip a dice to a 6, I reroll a save on him for 2 Cabal points, he just ends up being complete pain to take down. And that's kind of how like, whenever someone goes and shoots at the army, they generally oversplit, because in their mind they're like, okay, it's 5 infantry bodies, so I just have to kill 5 infantry bodies. So they dedicate like 10 shots of damage 2 at it, and that will never do it. Or, it's generally people have been oversplitting. The one time I had someone shoot an entire Obliterator squad on damage 2 profile into a squad, that wasn't oversplit, but the Infernal Master still survived it at the end.
Ouch. And I mean,
Yeah,
if they're really committing, you can also say, I'm not going to use any of my CP or Cabal point resources.
that is true.
Like,
I can always choose not to use the resources. Like, if someone just overcommits into 1 unit, I get to just accept that loss. It's 1 unit, that's fine. I have 5 others.
Yeah, because
And
200
then,
only, 200 points.
yeah, they're exactly. With an Infernal Master, they're 170 for a unit of rubrics
So
with Infernal
cheap.
Master.
Oh my
Yeah,
god.
it's pretty cheap. Yeah. Um,
My immediate thought here is that because you were saying over splitting, it's like hard to just commit in a certain way. It's also hard to maybe trade against you. First thing is that you have the mobility and you have like, especially for trading purposes, you can take this, like, what was this 95 guy on a disc who can move, and then you can shoot indirect on something. And I
mhm,
mean,
yeah.
even if you're only shooting Magnus indirectly because the other guys are out range, it still kills a squad. Skill
Yes.
usually kills something. Um, and also you can renew all your cabal points. Like if you're really like in this really cagey trading game, you can just say, oh, every turn, like first turn I'm going to use 26 cabal points, then I lose the unit, then I'm going to use like, what is it, 22
24
cabal points.
after I lose one Exalted.
Oh, okay, yeah, 24. It's
Yeah.
still a lot. You can still do the same
Yeah.
thing basically. So trading's hard. It's easy for you to get a first strike. It's
Yep.
easy for you to get a first strike on the thing that is dangerous to you.
Mhm.
So I'm kind of like thinking, oh, so I basically need to jump on you first, need to play aggressive myself, and then I'm exposed to all your damage.
Yeah.
And that might not be too good.
No. Yeah. In all my games so far, anytime someone decided to like push the Thousand Sons army,
Hmm.
as in like Chaos Knights or whatever, running towards me, it usually was a very quick game because the like if someone steps into all the threat ranges and all the like flamer ranges and whatever, the output of the Thousands Army is like completely insane. It actually like it makes no sense. Because just for example, like there was I played at the WTC against William Furman's Imperial Knights, and Canis Rex ran onto the middle marker, right?
Germany versus Switzerland, that was, yeah.
Exactly. So I step my guys out of my ruin and I just go, well, all right, you've decided to push me. You've decided to step onto the markers. I will step out with all 30 rubrics this turn because there's like no reason to keep anyone. Like if I'm going to step out with 5, I might as well step out with 30, basically. Um, and so step out with 30 rubrics. Make sure they have like targets available to them. Double Doombolt Canis Rex to the face. He takes 10 mortal wounds, right? So down at like 12. Shoot him with the first like Ahriman's Flamer Squad or whatever. Basically, like I don't know, one or two rubric activations and he's gone. I'm like, oh, okay, so left, right. I've got all my Infernal Masters left to shoot. I've got all the stuff left to shoot.
Hmm.
Magnus obviously hasn't activated yet. We're well like by the end of 2 shooting phases, I had killed an entire Imperial Knights army. 3 big knights, 2 small. No, sorry, there was 1 Helverin left that was off on the side because he came in from strategic reserve. Um, so that guy survived the second shooting phase. Um, but yeah, it was like 1,860 of points of Imperial Knights just evaporated in 2 shooting phases. Because it's a lot of damage. It's a lot of flamers. And yeah, um, what is the um, I have not yet sat down and just like because it's a complete chore. I should at some point sit down and do the math on all the weapons I have and like what the expected output is. Um, but the army is so weird in that it mostly is like a death by 1,000 cuts
Hmm.
kind of style of damage. So my shooting phases take quite a bit of clock to roll out because it's basically like, all right, here's a squad of rubrics, like with an Infernal Master. Here's 6 shots of Bolter, averaging 5 hits, wounding on 6's full reroll, averaging 3 wounds, turning off armor saves, or AP2. if I didn't turn off armor saves, because it 6s to wound or additional AP on rubrics.
Oh god,
So
I didn't even know that.
yeah, it's the Icon of Flame. It also affects the Psyker in the unit if I'm ever not on dev wounds. Um,
Yeah, you have
and
like how many weapons? So the bolters, what's it, the flame
Bolters,
cannon?
Soul Reaper Cannon, the Sorcerer's Warp Flame Pistol if someone's within 12.
Yeah.
Um, the Smite, the Warp Smite on the Sorcerer, which is also pistol typed, so he gets to shoot it in addition to his Warp Flame Pistol.
Yeah.
Um, and then the Sorcerer that's attached to the unit, which is either an Infernal Master or an Exalted Sorcerer usually, or I guess an 1,000 Sun Sorcerer. The Thousand Sun Sorcerer's Fires of the Abyss is also pistol typed, so he also gets to shoot his Warp Flame Pistol in addition. Um,
So many activations. Oh.
it takes a bit, but it adds up to quite like it just adds up to this thing where like, all right, like let's say there's Terminators sitting in front of me, and you turn off their save, and you go, okay, here's 6 shots of bolter, 5 hits, wounding on 5s, full reroll. Let's say 3 wounds. Then you do the Soul Reaper, 6 shots, 5 hits, wounding on 3s, rerollable.
Mm-hmm.
So you're in like 5-ish wounds with maybe 1 or 2 devastating. So at this point, you've killed about a Terminator and a half. You've made him take like about 8 saves, with maybe 1 or 2 being devastating.
Mm.
And then you go to the Warflame Pistol, 4 shots, wounding on 5s, rerollable ish. And like that maybe finishes the second Terminator, or maybe not yet. And then the Warp Smite hitting on 2s, 6s explode, wounding on 4s with anti-infantry 4+, devastating, re-rolling. So that's maybe another mortal wound and a half there. And we haven't shot the sorcerer yet that's attached to the unit.
But
And you're
you
just
know
like,
what?
well, there's already 2 Terminators gone, and I haven't even
I,
shot the character yet.
I feel like, of course, I think you said it maybe in this podcast or in our introductory one in German, that you went and did the math for characters and for the
Mm-hmm.
specific weapons and so on. And especially for Magnus, I think you need to do that, and also the big squads if you
Oh,
might
I
want to
mean, I
try
know
them.
the ones for like the characters themselves. What I
Yeah,
mean is
yeah,
I haven't like gone and added it all up
yeah.
to
But the
like,
thing is, like when you it feels a lot like Harlequins from in last edition, where
yes,
you have like so many different like you have one Harlequin bolt and you basically had like one grenade, 2 fusion pistols, 2 neuro pistols, and then you have the bolt with 2 shuriken guns, cannons.
yes,
And you have like this always also encapsulated into one squad of rubrics with the
yeah,
character. And if you just calculate it, it might not seem perfect or like not seem the craziest. But it's like the efficiency you get by being able to not shoot, I don't know, your Soul Reaper cannon at the vehicle, but on the infantry unit and shoot your mortal wound thing on the vehicle. And
yeah,
like this, or like even this thing where I remember with Harlequin, when you were shooting against you have some mixed targets, and then you shoot the melter, and the melter bounces off, and then you shoot the freaking cannon, and it's like the target's on like 1 wound left, and then you would first shoot like the grenade to kill off the character, like the one unit, and then shoot the fusion pistol to finish another. Like if
yeah,
that wound goes through, then you finish 2 terminators or something. And like
yeah,
you can I'm pretty sure you have this ingrained in your like
yeah,
your muscle memory, and this way suddenly when everything steps out and you can really like say, okay, I'm going to shoot this all optimal, and then oh, I have some wounds left here, so I know I need to split like this, like auto splitting. And I think we both know, like if you split, sometimes it's good to split even though you don't kill the targets you get, but you're still like shooting everything, and everything is getting like every model from you is doing the best damage.
mm,
Like if you shoot with the flamer against the infantry and with the mortar wound against the vehicle target and so on.
yeah. One thing that's really neat with the Rubric Marines now is that as soon as someone steps onto a marker, just every weapon is efficient into literally any target,
Nice, yeah.
because full wound rerolls just make your guns efficient. It doesn't matter what the defensive stats are.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I'm willing to roll my bolters on 6s to wound because it's full re-rolling and it's fine. You know.
Have you ever found that people start not going onto the objectives and really
Yeah, yeah,
playing
yeah,
with that?
yeah. Of course. Um, it it definitely helps with staying alive against Thousand Suns to just not touch objective markers. Um, the issue is when your units that you are trying to play the game with are the same units that are important to your game plan. Like for knights, where they don't get to like for example, Eldar. If you step onto the marker with 5 rangers and you put your fire prism right behind the marker, I'll have rerolls against the rangers and not against the prism. That makes sense. Um, but some armies don't have that luxury. For example, Custodes struggle with not stepping on markers quite a bit, as do Knights and Chaos Knights, in my experience. So, like, all of the armies that are kind of like, that don't have a ton of cheap chaff to hold markers for them. And then like Eldar is a very different game in general because against Eldar it's never about how much damage you have. It's about how much of the damage you have you are allowed to apply to the Eldar,
Mm-hmm.
basically. Which so against Eldar it doesn't really matter whether you have wound rolls. You're either getting to target something, in which case it's probably dead, or you don't get to target something, in which case it's probably living. Because you don't get to target it.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
you do have the ability to like the way the math works out, you are pretty consistent at downing a Wraith Knight in one shooting phase. um, it's a little bit dependent on, again, how many how much do you get to fire at them
Yeah.
because of phantasm and like line of sight blockers and whatever, and you get to chase after the phantasm and you get to like get line of sight on it with something and then warp sight it and then increase the range on Magnus and whatever, right? It becomes this whole game of cat and mouse where you're trying to chase down the knight and the knight is trying to hide from you with phantasm. You do actually get to do the binding, like the chains, the half move thing,
Mm-hmm.
before your opponent phantasms, which can really put a wrench in their plans. If they were planning on a 7-inch phantasm, and then you
Ooh,
reduce their
nice.
move characteristic to 5, and suddenly their phantasm is limited by their move characteristic. This also happens to Wraithguard, whose move characteristic goes to 3 when they get chained. And suddenly their phantasm is really bad. Um, so like it's a whole cat and mouse thing
Mm.
where like the Eldar vs Thousand Sons is like, it's one of those things where you sit there at the start of the game and you take your first like just 10 to 15 minutes to just map out what you are going to do with your Cabal points, how your opponent is going to react to this, and how you have to sequence everything so they don't get away from you. And then it all happens, and hopefully the knight is down at the end.
Or
Um,
both players mapped it out perfectly and nothing happened. And it's like gonna be like, okay, this is next turn the same thing
mm,
again.
no, I don't. No, no, no. I think if you do it right as the Thousand Sons of the Elder, the knight should be gone
Ah,
because
nice.
you
Because your reach is so high.
your reach is so high.
Mm-hmm.
They shouldn't get away from it because you get to because it's really hard to hide a knight from a single infantry model that gets to move 39 inches.
Mm-hmm.
And warp sighting it and then firing on it out of line of sight with Magnus is like, but that doesn't kill it in and of itself, right? You need to turn off its armor, shoot it with a Doombolt, shoot it with Magnus, and that's like right on the cusp of killing it. So if you get to shoot like one more gun at it, it's usually dead.
Okay.
That's kind of like where the that's kind of where the Wraith Knight ends up. It's very strange.
So Arne, you can kill Rave Knights apparently. You can kill a lot of stuff. It's hard to rush you. It's hard to hide from the Thousand Suns. We kind of like derailed a little bit from the Pumba list, which had 3 rhinos. Is it? I can imagine he could probably also only put small units in, like don't fill them up completely. So he has some
Hmm.
options. So he has some. So he can protect units. He has some more movement, but every time he basically used this protection or this extra movement, he is losing cabal points.
Yeah.
And you are choosing the route of no, give me my cabal points. I already have infantry targets for you. Um, be that behind a wall or out in the open, because if I'm in the open, I already committed, I did my damage, you have been.
Yep. Yeah, that's also why I'm not running multiple Thousand Sun sorcerers. Um, I know Liam is running, I believe, 3 of those. Pumba was running 2 of those.
They
Um,
have a lone operative 18 inches for their squad, by the way.
exactly. And I basically, uh, I still value those. I think they're good, but I don't value them as highly as I do like Infernal Masters and so on. Because one, they only generate 1 Cabal point,
Mm-hmm.
rather than the 2 of an Infernal Master, even though they cost 10 points more. And two is that they are useful if you have a way to make all your infantry unshootable. So if all of your squads are either in a Rhino or in a or lone op, then I value those.
Mm-hmm.
But with my army, I will already have like I already give people targets. So going like you're only allowed to shoot the ones with with the best characters. The ones with the weaker characters are untargetable. Is like, yeah, they're just going to shoot at the best characters then.
Yeah.
Um, but I play one of those for my Lord of Forbidden Lore because that guy is really important in my list because I have so many Cabal points. The ability to double up on a ritual. It's not just a thing that happens sometimes; it just happens every single turn.
And you
Um,
want to have him hidden like that. He has like the important enhancement. You don't want to lose that. You don't want the opponent to be able to focus that. And but he has to come into 8 inches in 18 inches to target it.
exactly. So that's why
I
I
like
have
that. Yeah.
one of those with me to protect my. Basically, he's supposed to protect the enhancement mostly.
Yeah, I see
Um,
that. That's nice.
and uh, I like I do see the appeal of just making the Thousand Sons army this army that is really hard to target in shooting, but I worry about the like. I just at that point I would worry about getting rushed by armies that are willing to, because like if you don't have 3 Infernal Masters and you don't have multiple Exalted Sorcerers on discs, you are liable to get rushed by Custodes, maybe by Chaos Knights or Knights, and generally you're still weak. Like I think you're still weak to Eldar because your Rhinos don't live that long against Eldar. Um,
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
so I'm not quite sure. Um, yeah. One other thing that I've had some disagreements over with other Thousand Sons players is Rubric Marines as 5 mans versus 10 mans. And in my army, just like I only have the 5 mans because I just want the 5 mans to buff the character. I don't want the character to buff a 10 man.
Mm-hmm.
Um, the only one that's weird is Ahriman. I'd love to have an extra 95 points in my list. If I did, I would take a second Rhino, and then the next 75 would also be a Rhino. But then if I already had 3 Rhinos, I would bulk out one of the squads to a 10 man at that point.
Mm-hmm.
Um, because that, like, Ahriman would like to have a 10 man to buff, because buffing Ahriman is kind of, yeah, low value. Ahriman's shooting is kind of bad.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but it's, yeah, just that.
Can I say with the rhino, because I wanted to finish this rhino discussion. Um, your list in my view now also seems very tailored to WTC, and not because of the team format, but because of the terrain format.
Yes.
I was, yeah, like it's basically, it's really hard to shoot further than 18 inches, except for with indirect towering or fire prisms.
That's fair. Yeah. Yeah. Basically, WTC tables are dense to a point where really long range guns are, they're not bad, but they really want to be towering or indirect to actually use their range. Um, so yeah,
Mm-hmm.
basically, I think the range consideration has been. It's also it. I think to some degree, it's not just WTC. It's also just 10th edition,
Mm-hmm.
um, where all the markers are generally in the middle on most missions. So usually, if your opponent wants to play the game, they will have to step to the middle of the board, at which point they are within either 12 or 10 of your deployment zone, depending on if you're
Mm-hmm.
sweeping engagement or not. Um, so you usually cannot touch any markers from outside of range of the Thousand Suns.
And
Um,
you basically, like, you don't need to get to your opponent to do the damage. You only need to get one guy to do allow your indirect shooting from Magnus to get to your opponent, or you need to a rhino to get to your opponent,
mm,
but you don't need to like a bunch of rhinos to carry yourself over the board.
yeah, and then the other thing is that there's the +9 inch range stratagem, um, which you can use on Magnus, but I have actually ended up using that quite often on the Infernal Master with the upgrade.
Hmm.
It puts his range up to 27 inches,
That's a
which is
lot.
a point where he sometimes just shoots from, like, if he deployed like in a ruin on the line and then he walks 8 inches forward, he is shooting your home ruin. Like, he's shooting into your home ruin indirectly,
Hmm.
with the torrent somehow.
Yeah, Miss
Um,
Torrance.
it's a screamer invocation. He is summoning screamers. That's what's happening.
Yes, it's not a
Um,
gun. It's a very eloquent psychic power that doesn't need to hit, and
yes.
does more mortal
So
wounds than anything should do. That is not a, I don't know. Uh, I somehow,
turn one
yeah.
versus Jaime Paris, Team USA Deathwedge. I increased his range and he shot 8 desolators dead.
Um, it was it direct or indirect?
Indirect, of course.
Of course. Okay.
Who do you take Jaime for? He didn't put his desolators out in the open. They were like hidden at the back of his ruin.
Well, you could have like disembarked out of the rhino and also then triple moved or something. I don't know.
True. Okay, fair, fair.
Everything,
There
like,
was
this is the thing. You have the agency. You can do whatever you want as long you just like
yes.
allocate the resource appropriately.
You can move a rhino 14 inches, disembark 3 inches from it, chase it with Magnus, like
Yeah.
fly after it with Magnus, and that so your unit that disembarked ends up in his bubble again. So then when you double move them twice, they get to move an additional 16. So they get to move 40, no,
Yes.
30 inches.
31. 12 plus
33.
3.
14 plus 3 plus. Because the rhino is affected by +2 move.
Ah, oh, okay.
Yes. So 33 inches is the maximum move of a, like, walking sorcerer or infernal master out of a rhino. Yeah.
Yeah. See,
See, I'd
that's
love to have more rhinos.
yeah, that's pretty nice. So, rhinos, tactical rhino, in your list, shooting will be possible, cannot be denied. Um, Actually, I was wrong. I'm about to open Liam's list, and it looks very similar to Pumbaa's. I thought he had Terminators, but he doesn't. He has
No,
cultists. I mistake some Terminators for cultists. Sorry, Liam. Um,
close enough.
and it has a comment. Sorry for formatting not correct. Here, too lazy to do it, but it's only cultists. Okay, I'm not. Thank you for that message, Liam. Thank you very much. It's basically very similar list. Let's not go into detail too much. We have to. It's hard. like I want to talk more about Eldar, but I also don't want to talk about Aeldari. My idea right now was the more like the stat check army or matchups you talked about.
Hmm.
Like if you spend, because every time you take a rhino, you lose some points that can do damage if the custodies come forward.
Yes.
Maybe I just bring up some other lists first, and then we can finally go over to the matchups that we wanted to discuss.
Okay.
So guys, please wait a second more. We will come back to the, like, we can kill a brave knight, yes, but what will happen afterwards and what happens to custodians? We will talk about matchups. So you have too many characters, obviously. You already said you don't like the big squads. You would take them, but they are like, you don't like the trade-off. You don't take them until you have all the other things you want. So that's why you're only
Yeah.
running 5-man squads. Then we saw the rhinos, only one for you as well. So comparison to the Belgium and Poland list. And then in the Spanish list, for example, very famously, Taraxa, I would say probably the most famous Thousand Suns player in the world, just before Liam, because Liam hasn't been out of Belgium and France that much yet. He plays the Terminator brick, and many,
Hmm.
many players play the Terminator brick. You said yourself, you started with playing the Terminator brick. Why are you not bringing the brick? Why are you not bringing this bomb?
So, the Terminators are a cool tool. They do something that other things in the list don't, which is stand like stand in the open in front of something and get shot and not fall over. Um, there's a few issues with it. One is all the units that I really want to be doing work in my army um, are already like T4 3-up save infantry profiles. So if I had Terminators standing next to the unit with the Infernal Master, you're just going to shoot the unit with the Infernal Master first. And then the Terminators might survive, but the guys actually doing the work won't. Um, the That's like one issue with them. The other issue I see with them is that they're just very, very expensive. Like if you are buying the 10-man Terminators, that is, I believe, 410 points. Then I want to say a Terminator Sorcerer runs you 105 or so. So it's like 515 points, I believe, for a unit of Terminators with Sorcerer.
125 for the Terminator Sorcerer. So
With the
it's
Umbralific Crystal upgrade for 20 points. Yeah, exactly.
correct, yes.
So yeah, so you're running a 535 point unit, um, and you're already going to run Magnus. So you already have one 410 point unit in your army. So now you will have half the points of your army in these two units. Um,
Mm-hmm.
and that entire 535 point unit only contributes 3 Cabal points. So, you know, they're like 150 points per Cabal point or something more. Yeah. Um, as opposed to like the 40-ish points per Cabal point of some of the other units I'm playing. So you end up with far less Cabal points. You end up with far less output because these guys, like, they do damage, but they also cost 535 points, which is like as much as 3 Infernal Masters plus Rubrics at 170 each, roundabout.
Mm-hmm.
Um, And I think the 3 Infernal Masters with 3 squads of Rubrics will outdamage the Terminators every time. And the
But you
Infernal
can
Masters can shoot. Hmm?
but you can crystal the Terminators. That's what I've seen.
You can
People
crystal the
people
entire Terminator
keep
unit. Yeah.
keep crystalling the Terminators. They really use it as, I don't know, a
Yeah.
hammer.
Yes. Um. The yes. But the Terminators can't fire indirectly. Like only the Sorcerer and the Sergeant can. Um. Whereas like 3 Infernal Masters can shoot indirectly. All 3 of them. So it's
Also
just
very
like
important. Sorry, note. Even if you turn the bolters into psychic weapons, right? You can do that with the
correct.
stratagem. You don't get to be a psyker and only
Yeah,
Psyker models can shoot indirect.
exactly. So the bolters can't shoot through walls while the flamethrowers can. um, yes. Um, so the basically the Terminators. The other thing is that like they're like in this, they're like pseudo tanky. Like they really want to think you that they really want you to think that they're tanky for their
Mm-hmm.
535 points, but then you run up against Eldar and you just lose that entire squad to a Wraith Knight. Or you run up against like the Mirror and you lose that entire squad to 4 units of rubrics. Um,
Mm-hmm.
and yeah,
I mean, Custodies
it's
might be good. They don't have -1 damage. They run in if
that's
they reroll.
I mean, well, Scarab Cult Terminators are T5 2 up 4 up with -1 to wound. So the Custodies wounds them on force, which they're 7/2/2.
Mm-hmm.
Full reroll, and the Terminators are OC1, so they get out upsec by like 3 guys from the Custodies unit. So they'll hold
Mm-hmm.
the marker, they'll have full wound rerolls, they'll pop sustained hits, and you're definitely losing the melee to
I mean,
Custodies.
maybe the whole the topic is not so much about survivability. I mean, I've seen it's like another list that it's not in here in my collection right now, but I've seen, for example, on our UN team, we had someone play a list, Nick, a good friend of us, and was quite aggressive, like running 3 beasts and Magnus and the Terminators, and then also big unit of rubrics with Magnus and with Ariman and Flamers, and it's basically like giving the opponent big targets,
Yep.
and your concept, like with what everything we have discussed, like when we start, or we like characters, we like the rubrics just as support, is like giving the opponent a big target. Maybe not. I mean, I suddenly can
Yeah.
also use my big hammer to kill your hammer.
Yeah, exactly. Um, Obviously, my army still gives opponents one big target. It's Magnus.
Hmm.
Can't get away from that.
Yeah.
But, um, you know, apart from Wraith Knights, Magnus tends to be fairly survivable. Um, so, yeah.
Hmm. Maybe one big thing is I always get the idea that, for example, this is the example list right now is from Teroxa. I will just read the list quickly so everyone knows what we are
Hmm.
talking about. So it's Ahriman on Dist, Exalted Sorcerer, 1 Exalted Sorcerer on Dist. So uh, Magnus, a Demon Prince, and 1,000 Sorcerer and Terminator Armor. 1, 2, 3, 3 units of rubrics. So only 3 basically support rubric units. 1 Beast, 10 Terminators, and then some cultists. So
Hmm.
if I get this correctly, he has the Terminator Sorcerer, like a 10-man Terminators with a Sorcerer, then 3 units of rubrics. 1 is Ahriman, 2 with Exalted Sorcerers, and then the thousands of Demon Prince running around. So it's actually kind of like 3 of the units where you have 6 of, plus your extra characters, and then Magnus, Demon Prince, Terminators, quite big units. And I'm I was happily forced by by our patrons just this week to play Grey Knights now, and it
Hmm.
feels like this Terminates, they want to play Grey Knights now, or they want to play old Thousand Suns. Like, as you were always
Yes.
running 2 units of 10 Terminators, or sometimes I think like the Liam version was more like 1 unit of Terminators with lots of rubrics. But even
Yep.
then, you would have one rubric, one big unit, because you can always teleport it. You can always say like, "Oh no, actually, this is gonna catch you off guard. No, this is gonna catch you off guard." And I've seen people like shove it into their opponent's face, or even try to put the Terminators into Deep Strike to still have like a little bit of this feeling of Ninth Edition, where you do the teleport once, get the perfect position, opponent will be out of position, and then can teleport again.
Yep.
But you can only do it twice, and it also feels different than before, because before that it was like all the characters swarming around doing mortals. You can do it can buff them much more, right? As I understand, the Terminators they're not that buffable anymore.
No, they basically end up just. I think the stats I said earlier, the T5 -1 to wound, 2 up, 4 up with 3 wounds each.
Yeah.
That's kind of where they cap out. Teroxer's list has a Demon Prince, which, if I recall correctly, has a 6-inch aura of stealth. So as long as the Terminators are within 6 of the Demon Prince, they'll also be -1 to hit.
No, that's nice.
And then that kind of gets you back to like 9th edition, where you did -1 to hit and 4+ invuln on your Termies with the 2 buff spells, Weaver and Glamour. And then you can have your 2 savory rolls from Weaver Fates, the new Weaver Fates, and then you can't blank damage on Terminators properly, because if you can only blank damage on Psyker models, so you have to take a save on the Sergeant to be allowed to turn its damage to 0. But yeah, you it's like they do end up like they are tanky, and I do think that the versions with more rhinos, the versions with like Demon Prince and Terminators, or like those kind of things, all of those probably have better Gene Stealer cults matchups than me. Because the -1 to hit bubble from the Demon Prince, for example, is good versus Gene Stealer cults. Terminators are kind of a pain for Gene Stealer cults. Though I feel like seismic cannons might eventually chew through those, especially as we don't have Armor of Contempt in Thousand Suns. I feel like if Thousand Suns had Armor of Contempt, like every other Chaos Space Marine or Space Marine or Grey Knight or whatever faction has access to, then I would be more willing to put Terminators on the table. But with that not being a strat for us, I just feel like you'll get like AP2 ignores covered to death eventually.
Interesting that you feel the what you're missing personally about the Terminators. It's not their offensive, but their defensive profile.
Their offense is fine as long as they're within 12 inches of their opponent. If they're not in 12 inches, they are offensively basically just worse than Rubric Marines. Because they're in 9th edition, they had the Bolter Discipline to always shoot rapid fire because they're Terminators.
Yeah, they would be
But
jumping around, shooting at 40, at 24 inches would be really nice.
exactly, and then they would do the spell for +6 range, so it'd shoot at 30. And now they only rapid fire at 12 inches, so they really need to be all the way close to the opponent to do damage. While if you just want to shoot psychic bolters at someone from 24-inch range, the best way to do that is to just take a 10-man bolter squad of rubrics, because the rubric marine bolter is just as good at 24 inches as the Terminator bolter. Because the rubric marines always have 2 shots at full range, whereas Terminators have 2 shots at full range and then 4 shots at half range. And then the rubric marines gets the full wound rerolls, which, something. And the 6s to wound are an extra point of AP as well. Though obviously, if you are planning to make your bolters psychic, give them full reroll hits and wounds from the stratagem, and swap your army to devastating wounds, then the buffs that the rubrics get don't matter. But like baseline, rubric bolters are superior to Terminator bolters output wise at 24 inches.
Nice.
Yeah. That's kind of like the. Yeah.
Okay, I have a trick.
Yeah.
I have a trick question. So coming to a topic that came up earlier, and I want to focus on now after we have seen all the different lists here. So Arne, you are quite an aggressive player, but maybe people have also heard you talk about this in some English content. With aggressive meaning like basically forcing the issue, not hiding in a corner and reacting, but more like, yeah, as I said, forcing the issue. Like, isn't that something you want to do? put a big brick of Terminators in 12 inches to your opponent and say, oh, this is actually really hard to kill, and I just did a lot of damage.
Yeah, but I much prefer rolling attacks over rolling saves.
Yeah, I
It's
knew that
just
was
more
the answer.
satisfying. So, like, I don't want to put, like, I don't want to play Custodes. I don't want to put my stuff there and roll 4-up saves on them. I'd much rather just, um, you know, stand behind a wall, get that first strike, and then come out once I've done my damage. Um, Usually, by the time that I step out from my ruins with my Rubric Marines, it's because I'm confident that the fight is over. No, this does sometimes happen to be turn 1 because an opponent stepped too close. It does happen that I look at the table and go, well, you have like a lot of your army within 26 of me. If I step out now, kill all of that, the fight will be over by the time I'm done. But yeah.
Glass cannon. So you like a glass cannon more?
No, it's not a glass cannon because you have to chew through 30 rubrics to shoot it back. Like
Glass cannon
it's
with some weird,
it's as
like,
much a glass
protection.
cannon as 8 Harlequin boats were a glass cannon. You know? It's like, yeah, I get to strike first. I get to have like the mobility and the tricks. And then when you shoot me back, you do have to work through that though.
I think you mentioned Astra in Town to be not a favorable matchup for your list. How do you
Mm-hmm.
feel about the first strike? Do you need to have the first strike?
Usually yes. Depends. I can deal with like getting shot by desolators once. That's fine. Cause desolators will like, you know, they'll pick a unit and they'll kind of cripple it. But because I don't have any 10-man units, so I only get blasted a little. And I have invulns, I have like armor. I can like it depends on the exact makeup, right? And like
Mm-hmm.
plunging fire, how many people can they fit in the ruin? Blah blah blah. It's always a little bit of variance. Um, but I can usually keep the character on the unit. Like I'll probably lose all the rubrics, but I can sometimes keep the character that gets shot by rubrics, and then I only get shot by rubrics once because I'll just kill him back after. Sorry, not by rubrics, by desolators. So like desolators are in this like it's okay.
Oh, Desolation Marines dying 2000 Suns. It's so funny.
Desolation Marines just do not actually have a defensive profile. It's really funny. They're like T4, 2 wounds, no armor save, no invuln save, no feel no pain. So they
Can
just die.
you have to correct me because I'm uh, yeah, I don't know, maybe I'll say it wrong, but uh, aren't you the reason for the German repulsor?
I might have killed those desolators a few times in testing.
Okay.
Yes. Um, Now the German repulsor is also useful for other things,
Of course,
but it was also a measure to at least get to shoot your desolators once
you had some
against
good
Thousand
arguments
Suns.
for it. I see.
Yes,
Okay, so
but
aggressive Harlequin style, play
yes.
style with shooting first. I already said this enough, I think, in the beginning. Like you can choose your targets. You're very quick.
Hmm.
You can do the first strike. Um, the terrain is makes a difference, but also, I mean, I don't know. Maybe on GW terrain should also be the same. We're coming more. I feel like the terrain's getting more and more unified. Anyways, feels also like I'm really like I can see a lot of things for myself here because like I was saying with Elder, I was like, oh, if I shoot one thing, if I kill one or two things from my opponent cannot react. Then you can
Mm.
always after that you can also usually can push or can like get a big advantage. And you basically also with the Thousand Suns with your list you have the advantage. I mean maybe like if you put enough units out of Rhinos or not in deep strike, you would also have enough cabal points. with the other list to always get a first strike on an important unit for the opponent. And basically, if your opponent can only shoot with 1,500 points at you, then you might as well step out and just like start the grind from there.
Yep.
Let's talk about matchups, and we don't have that much time left. We talked too long, Arne. I knew it.
Fair. We can maybe talk like 2 or 3 matchups, whichever ones you find interesting.
Okay. Say something. You can kill a Wraith Knight. How do you not get killed by the rest?
What is the rest? Can I play versus Manichima? Then the rest is like 10-man Wraithguard and another Wraith Knight.
Small
This
stuff that you shoot first again. Yeah. Okay. So
like if it's against Eldar, basically, I'm happy to go and fight the biggest units they can build, because then I just get to apply all my debuffs to a 500 point unit, and then it evaporates because Wraith constructs don't have an invuln. What I'm not happy to fight is like 3 War Walkers, 3 Void Weavers, and 3 insert annoying thing with an invulnerable save here. Because I have to play a tactical game then, and the Eldar are honestly better at the tactical game than me.
And I think you also told me before that against Eldar it's hard if you don't have these big pieces, and you have to do a lot of trading, and maybe also they can they can hide well, or they have lots, because Eldar things are cheap and efficient. Even though if you get to like, oh, I killed 2 things from you, you're like, the Eldar is like, oh, you know what, my 2 things were only 200 points, and then you lost at least 100 points too, or maybe 200 points yourself.
Yeah.
And it's hard for the Eldar matchup when the trading keeps happening. And then you're like, they're still getting their 2 CP for Phantasm and Fire and Fate, both
and
turns.
I no longer get 26 Cabal points. Exactly.
How do you deal with that? Do you need to, like, with your concept of Thousand Sun, how to play Thousand Sun, do you need to just at like turn 2 or 3 say, oh, now I have to push?
Somewhat. Well, so the way I dealt with it at WTC is I looked at, I want to say, the Spanish Eldar list had like a bunch of like War Walkers and Weaver things, and I was like, just don't pair me into that. Like, that's how I dealt with it for that. How will I deal with it now in singles in a week or so? Well, I'll have to. Well, so Doombolt helps, right? Doombolt does 5 mortal wounds on average, but it will, it'll kill a 5 mortal wounds average. Basically means it'll kill a Void Weaver about 40% of the time, or something.
Like, I really like this. I remember talking with you about it, and then like the Vortex Beast, and I keep seeing the beasts coming up, and then you said, "Oh, by the way, it gives like double range on my rituals." I was like, "What? This is yes, I can turn a 6 to do some mortal wounds thing, but you can just do 32 inches across the board.
36 inches, yeah.
36 inches across the board, ignoring lone operative. Do mortals."
Yeah. So Doombolt becomes really important versus Eldar if they're not on the Wraith Knight train. Because Wraith Knights, you still Doombolt those because it helps, but you really want to strip their armor. But like, for example, a Void Weaver, there's no reason to strip its armor, so you just want to like double Doombolt it if the first one doesn't kill it or whatever.
My lone ops, my ranger with Illic on the marker or something. Yeah, if they're not perfectly placed, they might. Yeah. Okay, so interesting. You Doombolt, you have stuff. Maybe we'll find out how aggressive you can have to play at a certain point. The meta is also adapting. Or it's different in singles, I would have to say. Okay, let's talk more about matchups. Arne, there was one very interesting matchup for me is Custodes, because I experienced a lot of different estimations by players, especially the Thousand Suns players against Custodes. Some really didn't want to play against them. I would expect your damage output might be tailored against them very well, but also they have tricks, they have rapid ingress, they can advance and charge, they have -1 damage, and so forth. What do you think about this matchup? How do you deal with that?
Yeah, so it's actually a matchup I practiced a lot because I was working with Adrian on like he was working on the matchup, and we actually just ended up playing quite a few times. And the matchup's quite interesting, but I think it's Thousand Suns favored. The Exalted Sorcerer on disc is really unfriendly for the Custodies to play against, because basically a unit with Blade Champion will go from like a 24-inch threat range to a 12-inch threat range. Makes sense, cuts it in half. But it feels like even more because they're basically their move goes from 6 to 3 and their possible advance goes from 6 to 3. So they're kind of in this like they're just not going anywhere. And then they can charge up to 6 inches if they roll a double six halved or an 11 because it rounds up. Um, but yeah, the custodies aren't getting to you very well, except for the unit with Trajan, who can ignore modifiers. But
Mm-hmm.
then you can usually single out one unit and just go, okay, well, one unit, I'm going to warp sight, turn off your save, shoot you a bunch. And then, yeah, the damage is like good enough to where you can kill somewhere about, I think I was able to kill 6 wardens with Feel No Pain plus the leftover 3 from another squad in one shooting phase. The 3 like had already used their Feel No Pain, so somewhere
Is
in
that
those like 8 or so wardens.
is that basically
Um,
your whole army committed?
yes,
Huh.
basically my whole army standing 18 inches away. But yeah, you know, if it works, kind of thing. And that's wardens, right? So through the 4-up Feel No Pain. Uh, like Alaris custodians or custodian guardians are quite a bit easier to kill. Um, because when I can just choose not to use the devastating wound mode and just go into like sustained hits mode on my weapons,
Mm-hmm.
and and then yeah, don't get hurt by the 4+ Feel No Pain versus mortal wounds that much. Obviously, they'll have a 4-up save either way, right? But devastating wounds don't do much against custodies other than against wardens, because against wardens, obviously, it bypasses the save, and they would have a 4 Feel No Pains against any weapon. So against wardens, dev wounds are great again. Um, but yeah, it's basically like you're killing about a unit and a half of custodies per turn, while shooting if you shoot the army at it.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and that's like indirectly mostly.
So they can't hide from you like they would.
Yeah. Um, and then obviously the slow makes up to 3 units are slowed at a time.
So you're telling the just the situation where you go, oh, so this is 13 inches away because you can only roll a 6, but you're still allowed to declare
Declare up to you can declare up to 12.
I'm 13 inches away. You can never.
I'd probably be 18, but yes.
Or 18? Maybe.
Just because that's my range, I don't have a reason to step that much closer. But yeah,
No, but just I mean like line of sights and stuff in the array. So
sure.
just like I just imagine there's like this hole where there's one unit of custodian stood, and then like on the right and on the left there's still units, but they're all like just like
Can't
arms
reach.
length, which is just 13
Yeah.
inches away and can't do anything. They can shoot you with some
If
stuff,
they
which
don't
actually
have a blade champion, their threat range is 9 inches.
fucking hell.
Yeah, it's really rough.
Yeah.
Um,
This alone, this guy,
yeah, he makes that matchup
why is
a
he not
lot
an enemy
easier.
list? Why is he not? So this is the second. Like the first one is the damage guy.
Yeah,
If I'm correct, right? The Infernal
the
Master does
Infernal
the
Master
most
is the damage guy.
damage, and this is the most useful like crowd control anti melee tool.
Yeah, yeah, and he's also the one who tends to get me the line of sight. for warp sight and stuff like that.
Because he has the disc.
Yeah, because he uses the disc in the 12-inch move.
Is that excluded, excluding vehicles and monsters for the half movement?
No, no, it isn't excluding. I don't even think it excludes Titanic.
Because it's magic.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure it doesn't even exclude Titanic.
I'm gonna look this up
Wait,
now.
I will look this up.
Exalted sorcerer.
There he
That's
is. No, it doesn't exclude anything. It can hit a flying Titanic. Don't worry.
because it's magic.
Because
Cool.
it's magic.
Okay, Thousand Suns, you control them, you kill them, but you commit your whole army, and that's something interesting. I think you were saying. I have no idea if it was in part 1 or in part 2. So if you only listen to the English one, you probably didn't listen to part 1. But you, one of them, you were saying it basically plays like a Primarch Space Marine list where everything's centered around Gulliman, and everyone wants to be in his support hour, or like maybe also something like our first Chaos Space Marine list looked like on the table with Abaddon in the middle, and you have like a 14-inch or 16-inch moving Abaddon now with like a bunch of character units. But the good thing is that because you don't have your units doing the main work, but your characters, you can always just have like four or five-ish guys who are basically the string out, right?
Yes.
So imagine it's like a little bit of a spider on the table, right, in all directions.
Yeah. It looks a bit like that, where you end up with basically the Infernal Masters and the Sorcerers standing at the front. So the Aspiring Sorcerer from the squad, because both of those are 18-inch range indirect. So those are standing at the front. So you have the 2 guys from each squad standing at the front, which adds up to like 6 guys from the Infernal Master squads, and then you have Ahriman's unit, who's usually doing kind of its own thing, and you have the Sorcerer unit who's doing its lone up thing, and is probably getting some line of sights for like doom bolts or whatever, and because they're untargetable. And then you have the Crystal, who's probably up in that stuff and probably jump forward to get line of sights and like slow people down. And then you have 2 of the like Exalted on discs flying around and like slowing people down, and those will probably be like warp time backwards after they slowed, because slow is end of movement, and then they warp time away afterwards. So that's kind of how it looks on the table against Custodes. I also do that a lot with a screening. The 2 Exalted guys on discs will fly forward, get their line of sights for the slow. The Rhino will move forward. The Mutalith Vortex Beast will move a bit forward, and then I'm like, all right, rapid ingress timing, cool. Move backwards again with 2 units.
Oh, nice. Yes.
Because
there's probably also
it
something
pushes out the rapid ingress like really far away from me.
Yeah, I can really see how Custodes with like a 10 Terminator brick, which they usually want to have like, oh, I want to be in 12 inches, I need to shoot something, blah blah blah, and it's like, oh, but they're just rapid ingressing on me, and then I'm dead, something like this, you know. But if you have like all these little turrets and you can slow, and you have the double move, which you have the Cabal points for you to still do that, that might swing the matchup a lot. I have one last matchup for you in our last 5 minutes we have here on air, and that's Necrons. So Necrons, I heard terrible stuff out of your practice, especially with Valentin, this year's German Necron Necron player on the Team Germany. Terrible things. I was like I was trying to build him up again, and I mean he really caught himself up again. Like he really, I don't know, built himself up.
He did well.
He did well with this Necrons. That was amazing. But then you played it. I don't know. I'm not sure how many times you had this matchup, but you had it once. I think it was a quite important matchup. It was against
Sweden.
Yeah.
And I only got 10 points.
Oh boy, you only bring me 10 points? What are you working for here?
Yeah, that was rough. I mean that one's completely on me, honestly. I had one of my Infernal Masters misplaced. So when I decided to kill the Lich Guard, I got in 2 of the Infernal Masters and the Crystal and Ahriman, but I didn't get in all 5 models from Ahriman's unit. I was trailing 2 Flamers who couldn't quite get in range. It was one of those like losing it by the margins things, right? Where like the Exalted Sorcerer, when he did the slow, he rolled the 1, failed to slow, did D3 mortal wounds to his own unit and killed one of the Flamers out of the unit because he did 2 mortal wounds. So suddenly I was missing 2 Flamers from Ahriman's squad, 1 Flamer from his squad, and
Don't
1
don't talk about
Infernal
dice here.
Master.
No dice. No dice. I don't care
No,
about
like
dice.
this is misplaced, right? I was out
Uh-huh.
of position. I was not in range with 2 Flamers. Then I lost 1 to the spell failing, and then one of my Infernal Masters was on the wrong flank. It was just like, crap. I didn't quite have everything in one place. I didn't quite have everything to commit. And this is one of those things where, like, against Necrons, obviously, you either kill them or you don't, and then
Mm-hmm.
they come back. So you need to have all your commitment like in one spot, and you need to be like focused on like in deployment. You need to know where the fight is going to happen and exactly where you will need every point of damage. If you do everything correctly, you can kill any of the Necron units. But if you don't do everything correctly, it's gonna suck. Because then they come back, and then it takes you another turn to kill them again, and then things happen. Obviously, you're not dying to Necrons, but it just like it becomes this whole thing.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, that's kind of yeah. In general, in the Necron matchup, what is important is um, Doombolt and Grenade are your activations that you can do that they can't do reanimation protocols after with a stratagem. So you're technically with if you have everything on the table and you have your 26 Cabal point, you can double Doombolt, triple Grenade a unit because you can echo twice and then grenade for a CP, grenade for your first echo, grenade for your second echo. Um, and that way you can put out a somewhat absurd number of mortal wounds
What's
on a
that like?
unit that's stepped close to you.
It's like
Average 19
nine on average with the grenades, and
grenades
then
and 10 on average with a doom bolts. So it averages 19 mortal wounds, which is a Wraith Knight, by the way. Um,
goodbye, goodbye, Raven
just in
Knights.
case you were wondering. Um,
Yes, your army can kill 2 Raven Knights easily, but it needs to be everything needs to be perfect.
you just this is generally the thing with Thousand Sons is you kind of when you misplace a unit, it really hurts because you have like 6 of these units that are doing all the work and they kind of move 5 and they want to be in the same aura
No,
ranges.
so
So
Arne,
misplacing one of them sucks.
I only do average of 17.5 mortal wounds against the Necron Royal Black with my Wraith Knight.
Yes, and that's still enough.
That's pretty mean.
Yeah. So that is before firing any of my devastating wounds weapons. So if you apply all your mortal wounds precisely to one unit, and then you either target it with Magnus with full rerolls and devastating wounds, or
Mm-hmm.
you target it with the Infernal Master with damage 2, full rerolls and devastating wounds, because realistically we're talking about Necrons who are on a marker.
Mm-hmm.
Necrons not stepping on a marker is kind of a yeah, um,
Mm-hmm.
would be a choice. So that's kind of where you can kill a unit of Necron warriors before they get to reanimate the first time,
Mm-hmm.
and you can just grind through a unit of Lich Guard the hard way because they have too many wounds. It's like 38 wounds in the unit. So if you do 19 mortal wounds, there's still a third of the unit left. You shoot it, there's probably still something left. They'll reanimation protocols, but reanimation protocols on Lich Guard only really brings back 2 guys on average. So if
Mm-hmm.
you just shoot them with 4 units of Rubric Marines and Magnus, they'll fall over usually. And yeah, that's basically that's the gist of it. That's the Necron matchup. Um, the other thing about Necrons is Hexmark destroyers are really obnoxious, but the standing back up stratagem, at least in WTC, can only be done after a unit has finished making its attacks. So the reanimating a character, which means that a Hexmark destroyer that dies to Doombolt or to the grenade strat won't stand back up,
Ooh,
which
that's
is really
juicy.
useful. Yeah, That's
That's really
that's what I
interesting.
got on Necrons.
Um,
Oh, and the slow. The slow is like backbreaking.
I get it. Yeah, I see. Okay, slow
Because
is
that
great.
unit goes to like move 3, advance D3.
But the main part here is having the guns in the right place and then applying them. And you did like almost like a micro mistake in your micro in that game, and then it brought you from where you're saying you get a lot of points. You only got 10 points, which I mean, 10 points is also could be on the losing side of a draw, which would be devastating in singles, I guess. And what I want to say? I want to say. So, how often do you use tactics you have already talked about? Like, oh, I will double move this unit to get it in range, or I will increase the range of this unit to get it in range. In these cases, or have you probably been standing perfectly in most of your games? Just want to give the people like a bit
Um,
of like people might come out of this and they think, oh, so Arne said I always have to know exactly like see the future where my opponent will stand, and then everything needs to be in like movement 8 or and then 18.
well, yeah, you do, to a certain degree, you are in the end a short range slow army. So you need to know where the fight is going to happen, and you need to know,
Mm-hmm.
and you need to be prepared for fighting on the marker where the fight will happen. Um, you get to cheat a bit on movement with the double moves and so on, but you don't have enough double moves to double move all of your 6 rubric units. So you're, yeah, in the end, you have to put your rubrics in the right spots. That's kind of, yeah, won't get around that. All right.
I feel like it's Eldari on hard mode.
It
Um,
is.
it is not easy. I hope we could inspire a lot of you out there, and we gave you a lot of input. Arne, thank you so much for being here.
Thank you very much for having me.
This brings us to the end of this podcast. I hope you really enjoyed our deep dive into Thousand Suns. My name is Fred. My guest was Arne. And yeah, please give us feedback on all kinds of social media platforms. You can also reach out to us on Discord. Did you like it? What could we improve? We are usually doing German content only, and we just wanted to, for this segment, reach out and do some more for our international audience. If you want to have more English speaking content, first of all, you can go back basically on our YouTube channel and check out the tournament 40k live playlist, where we have the live commentaries where we were in Austria, and this was the first major happening in Austria with around 90 people, and we commented that. So this is where we had an English commentary of live tournament 40k. You should also check out my personal game analysis of my games from the War Masters. I was playing Aeldari at the War Masters and got really close at winning the finals. And I played, oh god, I think 4 Aeldari mirrors. So don't worry, it's not only about Eldar stomping other factions. You can check out that. That's on our YouTube page as well. And if you want to get some help for your 40k game, Arne and I, we are both coaches for Breaking Heads. We mainly focus on the German scene, but we are also do coaching in English. That's no problem for us. We have a good view of the European scene. So feel free to reach out to us through the email, which is linked in the video description. Contact at breakingheads.de. Be careful, the contact is written with a K, not with a C. And we're happy to take your requests and arrange something with you. I always do a preliminary talk with everyone who's interested in coaching. Don't worry about that, and we will find some format which is best suited for you, and we help you develop your 40k skills in for every level you might start at or where you want to get to. So yes, thank you very much for listening, and see you in the next Breaking Heads podcast. Bye bye.